All right. Hey guys, welcome to the weekly episodes at Case Studies Lounge. As promised, I'll be updating a few times a week on various other topics which I feel are pretty important, but not necessarily involving a case study. So before we start, I also want to mention something. In all of these episodes, I use various niches, keywords, and websites to demonstrate my point. However, sorry about that, guys. I have a timer in place. Anyway, however, I am in no way endorsing any of these, niches, keywords, and elements on websites and saying they're profitable or they're unprofitable. They're only to be used as examples. Okay. Anyway, second of all, if you'll notice, I've also placed a one. That's a one. It's not an I or an L at the top right screen. The top right corner of the screen. It's going to be a counter on the episodes or screencasts. Okay. So that's about it for the trivia. Anyway, let's get started. Recently, I was involved in an e-commerce project, and I was contacting different suppliers for it. And since it was a little difficult to do so in the niche I'm working in, I thought I might shed some light as to how I think we should approach contacting suppliers and what I learned from this experience. So today I want to present 10 top tips in procuring suppliers. And from that experience, I can understand kind of why good teachers in internet marketing are so rare. Say that we tend to overthink things, and I think it'll become apparent as to why in a moment. Firstly, as an overview, I'm going to start with talking about my definition of suppliers, which is going to be really quick. And because instilling a bit of clarity here will be immensely useful, I think. Anyway, and afterwards we'll dive straight into the tips. So when I say suppliers, what exactly do I mean? I actually mean one of three things. First of all, it'll either be the direct manufacturer of that brand of product. They may or may not do the manufacturing themselves, but we shouldn't need to concern ourselves with that detail. Or it can be a distributor. Companies, that buy in bulk from manufacturers and then sell to retailers, or it can be a wholesaler, which is just another word usually for distributors. Okay, once that's out of the way, we can get started with these 10 tips. Because if you're involved with e-commerce, you probably already know this, but if you're kind of like just starting out, maybe it can be a little fuzzy at times, and it can be useful to have this definition. So, 10 tips to deal with suppliers. Tip number 1, do not wait. My experience, with using email, which is what I think waiting means. If you send an email, people might read it, they might not read it, it might be lost, it might, get cluttered or hidden under like 10,000 other emails that come in. My experience with using email as a medium of communication has been nothing short of horrible, especially for this project. I think it was a little better for the previous project when I was working in a different market, because for I think it was about 25 emails-ish I sent, I only received about 3 responses from sales managers or the parties that were responsible for dealing with dealers and retailers in general. My thoughts on this is that people don't check email, their inboxes get cluttered. I'm sure you can relate to this experience. It varies between industries. The larger the business, the more likely they are to ignore you, and quite frankly, just the way how companies run themselves and the individual people handling emails. Sometimes you just have bad luck. The person isn't in. Your message loses itself among the clutter of 10,000 messages, as I said, of emails they receive, etc. If you want to stick to email, though, do remember to send your email multiple times. Sometimes it just gets lost again, but I don't think it made much of a difference in my dealings with suppliers anyway. Instead, call. From that dismal 12% response rate, after I chose to call, I thought, email was horrible, so I tried calling, right? It shot right up to about 96% when I called. When you call, someone is always there to respond. They have to, right? Or else you really don't have much of a business if you can't contact it. Here's how I do it. I go on websites and search for a customer toll-free number or something like that and call. And here's what usually happens. An operator receives your call, and then you want to ask to be transferred to the dealer or sales department. You want to politely introduce yourself and state your purpose of your call. And, if you have it, follow a script or process in preparing what you want to ask them if you're not feeling too confident, right? Sometimes, you have to be patient. And again, it might just be bad luck. The person is away on a trade show, she's on pregnancy leave, or, just not there. If that's the case, call back in the next available opportunity ASAP. And if you're nervous, like I was a little bit, rehearse it beforehand. And if nothing else, treat it, like a normal conversation, with an objective in mind. Second of all, I think it's really important to be polite. I think I've messed up the order of my slides here. There we go. It's really important to be polite because most of the people I talk to over the phone are, okay, these must be the most polite folks I've ever talked to. It's always sir this and sir that, and they were just really, really courteous folks. And, you want to reciprocate that with the same level of courtesy. And, generally, they're also really friendly people and great people as well. So be friendly as well. I think it's also important to get connected to the sales rep. You do not want to talk to the operator. They do not have a single idea what you're talking about, and they're not in charge anyway. They don't have the information that you're looking for. So you really want to get connected to the sales rep, even if the operator says, they're not, tells you, on behalf of our company, we don't want to do this, we're not interested in online retailers, etc. You want to get connected to the sales rep. Okay? So ask politely to be transferred, regardless of what they say. And going back, this is usually the process, again, I follow. So you might want a script. Remember, I think the main thing to take away from here is you want to script your call. Okay, if you're feeling not too confident, you want to just rehearse a little bit and just prepare a couple of questions to ask when you're on that call. So that's about it, for tip number 1. Next up, prerequisites. Suppliers, when you talk with them, will often ask you to provide something called a resale license, if you don't already know this. They also want some trade references sometimes. They also might want a bank account number and bank references, an FEIN, and perhaps a social security number, etc. And all of this is done so that suppliers firstly can identify you as a business, and secondly, for some tax purposes, okay? That's what the resale license is for. And oftentimes, I think it's okay not to have one, but it's obviously better if you do. Many times over, however, you'll find that many suppliers are more than happy to work with you, even if you don't have one. Just don't count on that supplier being the first supplier you ever contact. As for registering a business, I think that if you have a business registered, and it's usually, it sounds fancy, but it's usually just filling out a basic form at your state's division of corporations, or whatever the equivalent of that is in your state. You're telling suppliers that you're serious. And many times, that's the extent of what they want, right? They want to see that, you're a serious business who are going to make sales. And if you're uncomfortable with that, you can apply to be a sole trader, or if you're adventurous enough, DBA yourself. It can be a pain, and if you haven't gotten these basics sorted out yet, it really pays off to do all of it now, okay? Because you need it later on, and it takes a bit of time to process your applications, as opposed to having it done later on when you need it, because again, there's a bit of a waiting time, and it's just a hassle to wait. Okay, so you might want to think about getting these documents ready, because it really, at the end of the day, it really is just about filling applications, a very simple application, and sending it in, waiting a while, getting it processed, and having some sort of a legal proof of that, a document sent back to you. So I really recommend that you sort these out early on in the process. And that's tip number 2. Thirdly, I think it's really important to be very crystal clear with your supplier's policies regarding returns, exchanges, and how they handle damages incurred during shipping. You do not want to have to deal with return stock, okay, if you're doing drop shipping. You don't want to deal with disgruntled customers who have defective products they can't return nor get a refund for it. Just as an example. However, it's rarely the case, but just in case, right? So you really want to get these policies clear right from the very beginning. Fourth of all, I think it's important also to realize that this is primarily a numbers game, okay? And you're going to have to accept that some suppliers, regardless of how hard you try and regardless of how persuasive you are on the phone, they just do not want to deal with you, and they just won't. And that's fine, And some reasons might include that they might be a really big brand, so it's not profitable for them to do so, or they're just not interested in doing this, or they've never done it before, etc. So just please accept that, many times over, it might not be your fault. It's not your fault. Just accept it, let go, and just move. It's fine. And you keep on calling. I think that, again, it's a numbers game. If you call 5 suppliers, okay, that's going to be the probability of you landing yourself a supplier. Especially if you're working in a difficult niche. If you only call 5 suppliers, the chances of getting that are slim. You increase that to 10, 15, 20, 30 suppliers, then you increase the chances of getting a supplier. And that's it. That is it. It really is as simple as that. And fifth of all, it's important to have a set goal in mind. Okay. If you have a list of 30 suppliers to contact, please don't expect to end up with 30 suppliers. And if you don't, which is probably the case, and you probably don't want all of them anyway, just start with 1. It's fine. And go from there. You're not operating as Amazon, Walmart, or any of the giant retail outlets where everything can be found. You're running primarily a niche store or a small store. And many times over, the comprehensiveness of the brands you feature on your site is never going to be your USP. It is not going to determine sales level. That's going to be part of your marketing strategy. Okay? Having more brands on your store does not mean more sales. That's an important thing to take away from here. Know and take comfort in knowing that it only takes a single supplier to get your store up and running. Okay? Be proud of that. If you've accomplished that, you can get your store up and running and start making sales. Period. Sixth of all, it's really important to accept that every single supplier is different. Okay, you have to consider things on a case-by-case scenario. There was a supplier I worked with recently who wouldn't deal with online retailers, or so I heard over the phone, an email. But interestingly, they actually had an affiliate program in CJ, in Commission Junction, right? And I was like, what's up with that? That was really strange. But, after being momentarily dazed, I was like, well, if that's what they have, well, work with that, right? That's what they have, so you want to use that. Seventh of all, approach suppliers with the attitude that it's a win-win situation. In other words, it is a mutually beneficial deal. And sometimes, really, it's a triple win situation for the customer as well. They're not doing you a favor, okay? And you're not doing them a favor. It's a mutually beneficial deal, and that should be the basis of your confidence. Make that call and sound confident because you are actually bringing in sales and you are serious about business, right? Just because, we're online retailers doesn't make us any less serious than brick and mortar stores. And we need to convey that to suppliers. And I think that there's sometimes, the attitude that because we're online, we're doing like an internet business, we're not really that serious because we don't really have a physical store and all that. But we are serious. And at the end of the day, we're bringing in sales for you. So there was 100% reason for you to listen to us talk about our pitch and, tell us about your program if you have that for, retailers. And if you don't, we want to pitch you to the benefits of running an online business, so you might want to give us your undivided attention during that time. So be confident, because we have every reason to be confident, all right? Eighth of all, this is something to avoid doing. Avoid this like the plague, using suppliers' directories. You might decide otherwise, but my experience is that if you directly call suppliers, you get a much more direct relationship than if you use a directory. There are a couple of problems, I think, in using these directories. Firstly, you can count that if you're using the directory, that there are thousands of other people using the same directory to sell the same products. In other words, you lost the pricing advantage immediately by not being able to compare between suppliers. Secondly, I have no way of checking, but I suspect it's very difficult to update such a large database. Okay, the ones that are good are large, right? Smaller databases have the drawbacks of not having enough suppliers, or maybe suppliers they might have aren't really applicable to your niche. So you end up with lost time and investment. So my advice, avoid these like the plague. Ninth of all, track. Sometimes, don't count on it being that you can just get on the phone once or twice and you can work with suppliers immediately. You have to call multiple times and follow up. That means you have to do this over a span of time. Maybe it takes about 2 weeks or 3 weeks to land yourself with a couple of suppliers that you can work with. It really helps to have a sheet, to track your progress with dealing with each and every single supplier on a sheet, so you can actually reference that when the time comes. I've included a worksheet, okay, at the end of the presentation you can download for reference if you're interested in using that. So I think it just really helps keep you organized, and that's something you might want to consider using. Last but not least, and this is something I learned, my mentor reminded me very recently. Know that the success or failure of your e-commerce store almost never hinges upon whether you can find a supplier. Whether you can find a supplier or not. It almost is never the case that you can't find a supplier. And the main reason why is because competitors exist carrying these very brands. If suppliers can work with them, they will most certainly work with you. Whatever it is never impossible. Well, close to never anyway. And that's the attitude you should have when dealing with suppliers, okay? And I think when I was stuck in a niche where it was really tough to find or to procure suppliers, not to find necessarily, this attitude really helped me kind of pull through and just keep on going whenever it was really tough. So just keep that in mind, and hopefully it's going to be very useful to you as well when you get stuck. And for today, that's about it, guys. Again, I've included the transcript for this presentation and relevant documents at the end of the presentation. Please visit my site at casestudiesllounge.com to download them if you're not already viewing this presentation on my site. As usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments. Please feel free to comment below, whether it be on YouTube or on my site or anywhere else. And please stay tuned for the next episode. Take care, guys. I'll talk to you guys next time.